Hi, everyone, and you're very welcome to Intent Decoded. Our topic today is from signal to trust, earning the right to sell. My name is Brendan Hughes, and I'm your host today. And I'm delighted to be joined by Leslie Venetz. And Leslie is, I have a long list of achievements and accomplishments for Leslie. She's the USA Today best-selling author, corporate B2B sales trainer, keynote speaker. She founded the sales-led GTM agency. You've personally made 250,000 cold calls, Leslie, and she's also an influencer, LinkedIn editorial top voice in sales, and 1% B2B sales expert. So Leslie, yeah, you're very welcome. And I'll get you to introduce yourself in a second. In addition, we have Niall O'Gorman. Niall O'Gorman, I've known for quite a few years. He is the founder and CEO of a company called MarketSizer. And Niall has been in the B2B signal intent market sizing kind of business for kind of more than 5 years. He's mapped the entire kind of global market of intent signals and really is the person I know best who knows how to talk about intent and knows everything about it. So, Leslie, in terms of context for kind of inviting you onto our call today, and thank you so much for your time. You have coined a few phrases, or you've used a few phrases that we find quite inspiring. One of them is earning the right kind of to sell, and that's kind of I feel like it's our big topic today. You've all these signals. It doesn't give you the right to sell to someone just because you know something about them. So do you want to just tell us a little bit about kind of your perspective on intent-based selling?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that beautiful introduction. I'm very delighted to be here and have this conversation with both of you. So earn the right came from me getting sales so grotesquely wrong early in my career. I showed up assuming that I deserved people's attention, not just even sellers. I was doing it to my colleagues, to my employees. So it was a real mindset issue that I struggled with early in my career. And like so many of us, you kind of get it wrong enough times and then you figure out through trial and error what feels better. And so I slowly found my way to this philosophy of how I like to show up in my sales profession and in the world, where I challenge myself to a litmus test of like, what have I done to earn the right to send this email, to ask them to get on a 30-minute discovery call, to ask them to use their social capital to push my product or service out in their company, of course, to ask them for their money. So that's kind of the big picture of how I think about earn the right. And then when we get into signals, which I know we're gonna deep dive, it's really a question of, have I taken the time to ask myself, what does this signal mean in the context of the work environment, the life of my prospect, versus just kind of that knee-jerk reaction of like, oh, they clicked on my webinar 7 times, here's an invitation to a demo.
Thank you, Leslie. So actually, before we dive into the meat with Niall, so you're, as I say, the person I know best when it comes to anything to do with signals and intent. Do you want to actually talk to us a little bit about kind of where you've come from on the intent journey and where you've landed today?
Sure. So I suppose the main reason for being involved in MarketSizer is a kind of a challenge from previous business, which is called ChannelSite. And ChannelSite was a company which was, fairly mature, scale up, it raised a lot of money. It's about 100 people, operate in lots of countries. But it doesn't matter how big you get, and it doesn't matter how many people you have, and it doesn't matter how much you think you know. You find out very quickly when you're looking at entering a new market or a new segment, or you're looking to try out different kind of channels, that you know very little in reality. And I suppose the need that we had was to kind of get better signals to help us figure out who to focus on or who to reach out to, why and when. So the kind of bottom line of this company, which is all about signals and intent, is how do we help people at scale figure out, who, why, and when. And then coupled with that is that you can still land flat if you have the best signals in the world and you know exactly when to reach out if you get the context wrong, or you get the context right, but you get the timing wrong. You call somebody in Germany on a Saturday while they're having tea with their kids, it's going to land flat. So I think that's why today really excited about this conversation, because it's the two go hand in hand. And if they're not working together, then neither is going to work out, because you can have the best pitch, the best script for the call. You can be the most personable person in the world, but if you get the context and the timing wrong, and the signal is misread, you're not going to get anywhere. And by the same token, you can have perfect signals, but if you are aggressive on the phone, or you're not respectful of people's time, or as you said, Leslie, social capital, then again, it's going to land flat.
Yeah. So we've all seen it go actually very well and horribly wrong. I was talking with a colleague earlier today, talking a little bit ahead of this, and he was talking to a friend of his about his 10th wedding anniversary. A few hours later, but 2 or 3 hours later, he gets a push notification on his phone for one of his shopping apps, and the shopping app says, "Hey, here's some gift ideas for your 10th wedding and for your 10th anniversary," right? And he's a tech person, but it kind of freaked him out, right? And I think, Leslie, the theme, and just tuning into some of the things you've been saying over the last kind of year or two, is, you can, just because you have this signal and you know something about who you're trying to reach out to, doesn't mean you should use it, or there's a better way to think about using it. So what are your thoughts on that? Have you seen it go horribly wrong?
I have. So I think two thoughts on that.
Yeah.
One is that I see some misconceptions or some misunderstandings around how to use a signal. And the biggest one is that I think folks sometimes don't understand what a signal actually is. And so what they're desperately trying to find, because for years, their sales leaders, the gurus on the internet have been like, you have to personalize, everything has to be personalized. So they're desperately combing through social media to try to find anything to say to this person. And then the emails are like, hey, how was your family vacation in Disneyland? Hey, like, how many Negronis did you have in Florence? Anyways, here's my widget. So that's one way I see it go horribly wrong, that you're taking this personal tidbit, which feels kind of icky when a total stranger is like, hello, I've been watching you. And then you're taking it and matching it with something completely unrelated. So there's also a disconnect. Have you both seen that one?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and with that, like, I suppose you're essentially saying that the kind of signals are creating the kind of curiosity, but not necessarily the permission to reach out on those. So, like, yes, I may find out that you like dogs. I like dogs. That can be very easily woven in a kind of way that's not going to give the ick feeling, and kind of let people know that you're a dog lover, or incorporate it somehow, light touch. But if you are kind of talking about things related to somebody's kids, and you're going, oh, I saw the highlights and the reel about your kids' play when they did the nativity scene, that's not going to come off well. And I suppose what are the things which, what's permissible, generally permissible, to include when you're ultimately trying to pitch something? So how far do you go into somebody's kind of personal life, or whether it's work related or family related? What are the kind of natural boundaries? And obviously in different cultures there's different expectations and different norms and different tolerances, but broadly speaking, what would you say is the right side of comfortable versus starting to get freaky?
Yeah, great question, because it can get freaky fast, but also please always send me pictures of your dogs. There's never too many dog pictures that I can be sent for it to get creepy. So just full disclosure to anybody listening. So I do a couple things that maybe are different than how you approach looking at signals and intent. So I'm curious to hear your take on this as well. One of the things that I teach my clients, because we are trying to personalize at scale, and I put that in air quotes for people maybe that are listening and not watching, because I think that's a phrase that's a bit overused. So what I mean is that we are trying to build ICP segments. We are trying to build niche lists of prospects where we have used enough filters that we can make some extraordinarily educated guesses about what a CFO in a company that is between 500 million and 100 or in 1 billion in the pet foods industry in Europe that's just gone through new regulations is thinking about, right? So the way that I start thinking about how to use signals is I first try to build in firmographic and demographic filters to my list, and then layer a signal on top of that. And we can get into, I sort of think about signals in 3 different buckets as well. So that's sort of the first, like very top of a funnel bucket. So what I always encourage folks to ask themselves is the piece of information I'm using, not just true, but also relevant. And so if we index higher on relevance, then we don't have to worry so much about being creepy, because you can put in like, PS, saw on your LinkedIn headline, you want to pet all the dogs. Here's a picture of my dog. That's fun, that's silly, and it's additive to the relevant message that I have already sent. And so often where I see a bit of a disconnect is that people will use signals like somebody just got a new job or got promoted or got a round of funding. And it's kind of like the creepy messages where they'll state the truth. And then the very next sentence is like, and anyways, we sell an our product. And there was a real failure to connect the dots to ensure that you're communicating anything of relevance to the prospect.
I think, Leslie, I picked up somewhere along the way, and I'm going to misquote you, but it was about not showcasing or bragging that you have the signal, right? But about kind of identifying what the implication might be. So, for example, I know you're generating X amount on a particular marketplace. Oh, in that category, there's 50 times more opportunity in there. So the implication is, hey, there's a lot of headroom here for you as a brand to grow. So have you seen that tactic? Like, so obviously it's relevant, but then we're leaning not into the fact that we know the data point, but what we think that might mean. Am I misquoting you, or have I?
Yeah, no, that's a really brilliant summary. The way I teach it is a shift from product to problem-centric messaging. And if anybody listening to this opens their inbox right now and goes through their emails, they're going to realize pretty quickly that it's probably like 80-90% very product. Like, we sell my product, our company. And so we constantly like hear this narrative, the banging of the drum, that like outbound's harder than ever. Nobody's opening emails. But the brass tacks is it's because 90% of our emails are like very selfish and seller-centric and not worth reading.
Okay, so what does it mean for me, or what's the opportunity here for me who I'm opening the email? Yeah. Okay. And Niall, in terms of, can I ask you in terms of that topic, the kinds of difference between, again, showcasing something, and then have you seen people using signals in clever ways?
Well, like I think one of the topics that we talk about a lot is kind of signal blindness. So I think everybody would agree that there's plenty of signals out there, loads of different contexts or signals. People go to a website, they read a blog, they sign up to attend a webinar, etc. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're ready to purchase. And depending on the type of product that you're selling, if it's something which is a high frequency, low value item versus, it's very expensive and there's a lot of consideration involved, there's probably going to be a lot of touch points, potentially across loads of different mediums, channels, in-store, etc., as you look to purchase that product. And it's trying to find the balance between what is something which is enabling that next kind of step in the relationship building, and it's leaning in on trust, and you're starting to share something of value that is, timely to the context. So if somebody downloads a case study and you call them 5 seconds later, they haven't even read the case study. So you haven't given them an opportunity to consume the content, to get the value, to be ready for the next stage. So obviously there's a clear timing element there, and different countries there's different expectations. So it's nearly rewarded in North America if somebody gets there fast. It's like you were on top of it, you got there. I'm nearly impressed if you get through to me and you get the timing right. Where other countries like Germany, it's nearly offensive if somebody is kind of going, hold on a minute, how'd you get my details? Why are you contacting me? I haven't even read the thing. What is this all about? So again, bringing it back to what we focus on, the world of signals, is to try and say, okay, what is the piece of information or the dots that we can join together which suggests we have a right to reach out in the first place, and then we want to help the person or the AI agent reaching out on your behalf, if it's at scale, try and take those elements on an account by account basis and make it relevant to that individual based on persona, based on their company, based on movements of signals. In our case, it's all about tech signals and movements of platforms. So you're not just getting there, hey there, have you got a minute? Hey there, quick question, because our inboxes are just full of that spam and nobody opens it, nobody reads it. All this, cold email goes nowhere. So given that, what are the things that you have noticed are cutting through? Like, what is getting through the noise? What are the kind of practices that people, because everything that gets out as a methodology is copied in a fraction of a second and is then amplified by AI GTM tools. So what do you feel are the kind of principles that cut through the noise, whether that's one person reaching out and personalizing everything themselves versus somebody leveraging a system to do something at scale?
Yeah, such a brilliant question. So generally where my clients are, like between 50 and 500 million, and not selling like 100K plus products where we're rolling out ABM, contact level personalization rarely makes sense. And so what we are trying to build are strategies and processes that allow sequences to feel one-to-one without them having to be one-to-one. And so what I found cuts through extraordinarily well is that very problem-centric messaging. I love to run people through a workshop called FABs. And you probably remember the old marketing framework, AIDA, attention, interest, desire, action. And so it's a bit of a tangent or a spin-off to that. Zig Ziglar actually used to teach it ages ago. So I did not invent this, but I've iterated it to make it more applicable to sales and the modern buyer. And what I ask people to do is take a feature, whatever feature they sell the most or they think clients buy the most, don't overthink it, pair it with an advantage. And when we talk about advantages, it's generally the same four that come up, but you could probably guess them. It's save time, save money, make money, or reduce risk. And that's where most sales messaging ends. It's just, here's my generic feature and it saves you money. And the prospect's left thinking, does it? Like, how can you be sure? It doesn't seem like you know anything about me. And so what we do is go one step further to really ask why it matters to them. And it's as simple as being like, well, why does that matter? Why does it save them money? What would they do with that money? How would that impact them? How would it impact their organization? So we just go and ask a bunch of open-ended questions. And it doesn't mean we're going to use all of that, minutia that we've kind of talked through in our sales emails, but it allows us to approach copywriting from a perspective of here's the real impact that this would have on a person. And you no longer then, as the person writing copy, feel like you have to talk about this generic advantage or even worse, just kind of feature dump on them. You have this new view on what it really means to that human in the job that you're reaching out to.
I think that's really interesting because very often if you ask people what the real value they get from your feature, it's going to be words like peace of mind, confidence, reassurance. Like it's those words, and salespeople never or rarely reach out with the real impact that a product or feature might be having on them. Sorry, Niall, I cut you off there, but yeah.
No worries. And with the companies that you're advising, obviously you have different people involved in the upper funnel, middle funnel, lower funnel. How are you advising that they kind of maintain consistency and kind of joining the dots, so when the marketing team sends out their campaign, whether that is backed by media or it's sent out in an e-blast, by the time they get to talk to somebody, whether that's inbound or it's outbound approach, how are your customers, I suppose, keeping the momentum and the continuity of that initial touch point, or are they? So are you noticing anybody who's kind of getting it right from, I sent out a perfect mass personalized campaign, it nailed it, it hit everybody perfectly, but then they had to talk to somebody, they booked a demo, and then that person had no idea, they hadn't even heard about the campaign, or they did know about it, but they were clumsy and they hadn't paid attention, or they didn't know anything about me, even though all the information was in their CRM. So how would you advise your customers that, okay, you've nailed the campaign, you got it out, it hit the nail right in the head, how do you make sure that that continues through every interaction, every touch point across every channel in that conversation as that relationship grows?
That's like a sneakily complex conversation, because now we're talking about sales and marketing alignment. Now we're talking about how are our reps enabled and empowered to prep for meetings. And so I would actually take a step, like if I was going into an organization and I uncovered that those were some of the challenges that were being faced, that like marketing was performing well, or that we're getting a ton of MQLs that are actually leads, actually qualified, and then there's a disconnect when they get on the phone with sales, that sales is having them repeat themselves because nobody likes to have to
Sure.
repeat information they've already given. I would take a step back from thinking about signals, and I would say there are some organizational issues where maybe folks don't have a pre-call checklist. They aren't being held to that standard. Like nobody's spot checking them to make sure they do it. Often I see, if that's happening, that their calendars are so overloaded that they don't feel like they have permission to take 15 minutes to even prepare for a call. Or maybe they're just kind of green and they like simply don't know that these are the, use a 3x3 so that you at least spend 10 minutes going over the critical information before you get on the phone. So I would take a step back and I would look at some of the organizational mechanisms. And then I would also make sure that they have the skill set enablement to both know how to prep, but not just like go through the checkbox and get the information, but know how to then use that information to show up to the call with some sort of point of view. And part of that point of view would be, it seems like you responded very positively to our marketing campaign about XYZ topic. Usually that means A or B. Is that the case for you, or is it something else?
Well, I think you raised an important point there, is that sometimes it's as simple as, are you giving your team the space to even think for a few minutes beforehand and to do their research and be able to be comfortable and layer in their kind of personality into the conversation. If they're back to back doing demo calls, or they're doing hundreds in outbound with a robo dialer, they don't get that space. So even if they have perfect materials and everything is well executed, it's going to be near impossible for them to be consistent and to have that kind of perfect experience when they get on the call or they do the reach out, because they're just going to be tired and they wouldn't have had a chance to prep. So, okay, perfect.
Earlier in the call, as you said, there was, we didn't let you finish it out, 3 dimensions to signal. So you talk about relevance. What were the other 2? I think we didn't give you a chance to chat out them. Yeah.
I'm not sure where I was going with that. I think initially I was talking about the ones that are like very personal and completely unrelated versus signals that are like, congrats on your funding round or your promotion, that are professional signals, but they're often not used in a way that makes it easy for the prospect to understand why that signal is relevant to the solution that you're offering. But I will share another framework I use to think about signals as a POV framework, and it's problem unaware, like option or opportunity aware, and vendor aware. And so vendor aware might be somebody that's like on your website, on the pricing page 12 times in 24 hours. Like at that point, I'm going to have my team jump out of any sequence that they're in and make sure that they are like calling and reaching out and trying to get that person on the phone. Option or opportunity aware is like they are probably aware that they have a problem that's worth solving, but they're not exactly sure who solves it and how they would want to approach it. And so that's when people are maybe attending webinars and downloading white papers. And what I often see is that somebody downloads a white paper and immediately it's like, thanks for downloading our white paper at 2:38 a.m. Like, would you like to book a demo today? And I find that usually in that like option opportunity aware, they're just looking for more information. Because they know they have a problem, they know it's worth solving, but they need just a little bit more information. And that's a perfect opportunity for you to build trust and build credibility by helping them navigate that process. And then the problem unaware, that's where most of our signals should pick up, where we know, based on our expertise selling this product or solution to this market, that if this set of signals stacks up, that it's highly likely that they have a problem that they are maybe unaware of, and we can start laying that groundwork of sharing insights and sharing, relevant content with them.
I think what's really interesting there, Leslie, is the sales activity is quite different. Right? You're right. Like bottom of funnel, it's a hard sell. Hey, can I help you with pricing, evaluating features and options, etc. Right up to the consultative or maybe advisory, etc. Niall, I know you're in the space of helping people to figure out those combinations. I know you call them, I think it's adjacent categories. So somebody might be in market for a particular solution in a particular category, but actually sometimes it's the combination of signals that are really good indicators for sales teams. How does that work? Give me some examples of how you've seen that work effectively.
Sure. So again, if you take the example of some of the kind of categories that we would focus on, so we would lean into SaaS vendors who are operating within live chat, customer service, help desk, ITSM, so companies like Intercom or Zendesk, 8x8, etc. And we're focused on seeing signals that suggest that somebody has started to trial one of their products, somebody has finished a trial, somebody has an active solution, or an active subscription, a subscription is churned. But what's also relevant and a very strong indicator is, maybe if they have a HubSpot CRM, maybe that suggests, even if your product and none of your competitors there might suggest that it's still a relevant place for you to operate and for your product to be sold. Also, from a timing perspective, that they have a solution from a competitor doesn't necessarily mean that you can't sell your product. You might want to then focus on, well, when do they do their renewal, and work back 120 days, and what are the problems that you solve, or how are you better? Is it pricing, customer service, etc.? And think about different ways using that data set to enable you to kind of reach out and leverage not only the direct signals, as in they are a competitor, it's a similar product, here's how we differ, but also the signals around that. So what other platforms are they using? Are they showing evidence of becoming a bigger company, which may mean they need a more robust solution, or they may need professional services, which may indicate it might be a bigger deal, things like that. One of the things I noticed in a post you did recently, Leslie, is that you have essentially been supporting people for a number of years all about outbound. So it's helping kind of B2B companies do outbound, but you yourself focus, or I suppose primarily we're getting inbound. So it's all referral, it's a lot of people reaching out to you versus you reaching out to them. But recently in the post you said you've started to now do outbound again. So I'd love to hear your perspective of kind of inbound versus outbound, and what that means from a kind of a signal perspective, trust perspective, and I suppose an approach. What's different, or what have you found?
Okay. I would be delighted to answer that question, but what you just said actually brought up a question for me. And so you'll have to forgive me here for picking your brain a little bit. But often when I start working with companies, they are new to signals, or like they kind of thought they were doing signals, but you dig in and you're like, oh, friends, you weren't, but like, that's okay. I'm curious if you have somebody reach out to you that is brand new to having any structure or repeatability around signals. What are the ones you like them to start with?
What are the signals?
No, understood.
Yeah, or like, how do you get that? Yeah, how do you get them to start where it's like you feel confident they can do it right?
Sure, it's a great question, because if we kind of break it down into a couple of different buckets. So we're looking at tech signals. So we're kind of saying, has somebody started using something? Are they still using something? Is there evidence that they've stopped using something? So they're churning. So of all the data points that we could provide, we kind of help people look at and say, well, as a starting point, you can start to see you have customers, and within that customer base, from time to time, they're going to start looking at alternative solutions. It might be coming up to renewal time frame. They may be starting to think about shopping around. Can I get a better price, better feature set, etc.? Or it could be driven by the shiniest object that's on the street. So Finn, Intercom, big shiny AI chatbot option. Everybody tried it out because it was the hottest thing in town. So it's taking a signal versus trying to react to every signal, and then saying, okay, well, today or this month, we're going to focus on every customer that we have, which is due a renewal in the next 90 days, is there any evidence of a named competitor which has started to actively trial on that site? Now, some companies are so big, it could be a different department, it could be different context, it may not necessarily be competitive, it could be complementary, but it's going through that exercise and saying, well, logic is, if your customers are due a renewal, and they don't show any evidence of trialing a named competitor, well, then maybe they're perfectly happy and they're just rolling towards a renewal. If they show any evidence of looking at a competitive solution, or what we call a frenemy, which is somebody that could be competitive but not necessarily competitive, well, then that's time to wake up and get your account manager to reach out and check in that everything's okay, and do that 120 days out, etc. So taking a simple use case which is relevant to the team. So are they net new acquisitions? Are they the expansions team? Are they the retentions team? And try and bring something which is simple, scalable, and repeatable, with one or two signals that they can start to get comfortable, and then start to expand it out. Because if you try and turn everything on at the same time, then it becomes a car crash, and everybody's running into everybody else, everybody's confused about what to do, and nobody knows what to do next. But if you just pick one thing, keep it simple, and then just build that kind of muscle memory, then you can keep on layering on those different sequences and those different approaches, and build from there. Because otherwise it's going to be very challenging if you just say, here's a magic box, you shake it, it gives you results, and don't worry about it.
So true. I think it can be easy for sales leaders, for founders, CEOs, to underestimate how much of this is actually a change management initiative, as much as it is a process and skill set initiative as well. And that was really highlighted.
Well, you raise a really important point, is that we could have perfect signals, but they're totally irrelevant if what we generate doesn't dovetail smoothly into the existing processes and frameworks, and methodologies and work practices that your team uses within your organization. So it becomes chalk and cheese, and it becomes a friction point if it's going, here's a magic box, it's it's magical, it'll just make things better. It'll never work, it'll never land. So you have to the jazz hands, you have to figure out who is the person on the other side. Is that somebody internal? Is that an external strategist or a fractional support person who maybe can help translate what you do? So in our case, we end up partnering with a lot of fractional experts on strategy, on how do we land what we do properly within an organization, because there's no one size fits all. We turn up and we plug it in and everything works. There's lots of hard work in just getting to understand the organization. What are the problems that they're facing? How's that different to everybody else? And then how do we make life easier versus just add another thing to log into, which is going to cause friction and frustrate people because they're already busy. They're already being pressured to hit their targets. This thing has to make life easier versus distract and just become another nuisance.
Leslie, we've been talking for about half an hour, and Niall mentioned it once and you haven't mentioned it. So in terms of the role of AI in the conversation, so as I am surprised we haven't talked about it yet, because it's hard, right? Because it's AI will be, I think in most of our experiences now, will do a pretty horrible job, right, of really getting that personalization, really building trust. Again, are you seeing it working well in some contexts? In what context? How should we think about using it in outreach? Or just don't.
Yeah, no, okay, here's what I love using AI for. I am often they're in industries and spaces that are not my core domain expertise. And so when I am trying to help them get to some of that benefits, that outcome language, often they're like SDRs or AEs with a couple years of experience. They're not a CISO that has worked for, like a Fortune 500 company. So they don't even really get it. So I love using the LLMs to go in and ask questions about what's going on in this market. Who do they primarily sell to? What's going on with the people they sell to? What recent regulatory shifts have happened? How has that been met? And I also love using it for like contact level or like seniority level research, because I often will see people default to like the finance executives like you sort of language, which doesn't work. It's very lazy. It immediately tells somebody that it's a cold outbound email and, it sets off those mental spam triggers. But like, again, these AEs, these SDRs, they've never been a CISO, so they don't understand the difference between how a CIO and a CTO and a CISO versus like a manager of IT analytics are conceptualizing problems differently and what it means for them on a day-to-day basis. So one of my favorite ways to use AI is to allow it to help me better understand the ecosystem that my prospects exist in. I don't love it for copy. And that doesn't mean that I don't use it for copy. I will sometimes have it spin up sequences. Like I use a tool called Reggie AI, and I have for 4 years. And I think it helps get my juices going. And that saves time, and that is still a value. But I'm somebody that I would consider myself an expert B2B sales outbound copywriter, and I have tested pretty much every tool on the market, and I've not yet found one that is send ready without edits. And it's not even that the copy might not be quite good or that they haven't found a good signal, but we have to remember that LLMs are statistical average generators. So the outputs that they're giving you, even if they're pretty good, even if they're getting ranked, on one of those tools, like 96 out of 100, they still are going to sound like the same garbage that everybody else is sending in mass automated because of AI. So that's something I love about it and something I think people should be a bit cautious about.
Great.
Perfect.
100%.
So what about, I suppose the way we would look at it, because we had a challenge of where we were trying to stay away from doing the kind of personalized messaging outbound piece. We were going, no, we give the signals, we tell you who to reach out, when, why, etc. But then we gracefully hand over to some kind of marketing automation solution or another platform or your team who are then going to figure out that messaging. Because as you said, it's horribly complex to get it right. And even when you get it right, a lot of the time you get it wrong. So, where we've, I suppose, kind of landed is that our role is to maybe try and help you with some conversation starters, some suggested speaking points, phrase it like it's a conversation, but the absolute expectation you're going to take it and make it your own. In that couple of seconds, you're researching the profile on Sales Navigator or LinkedIn or however you get to the point before you hit send button on that messaging. But I think that's okay when there's a person who's doing kind of a one-to-one or one-to-many within their own control, but it's when you're using other platforms, and there's a lot of them out there, that are literally sending out hundreds, if not thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of messages, which are so-called highly personalized, but just turns into an absolute, disaster. So I suppose there's a balance of, it's a great enabler for role play and helping you to get to grips with who is the person on the other side of the phone or on the other side of email or on the other side of this, WhatsApp call. So you can kind of nearly role play with the AI before you get to talk to the actual person. But when it comes to kind of sending out hundreds of thousands of messages, I'm still, I suppose, skeptical by looking at my own inbox as to how perfect that's going to be, because it involves so many disciplines. It involves the marketing team. It involves, the team who are sending out the campaigns, making sure that they're translating that kind of vision into execution of the campaign. But then for the individuals who are then acting on that information from within the team, how can they pick up where you left off? Have they gotten training? Are they getting speaking points? Because otherwise it just feels completely different to that kind of broadcast messaging. But getting back to that question I had for you earlier, which is, you've done that interesting flip of inbound, outbound. So what's your experience, given all your years of helping people get outbound right? You've now recently gone back to outbound. So why did you do it? What was your approach? And I suppose from a signals perspective, what are you doing, and how is that different to what your clients are doing even?
Yeah. So I spent my entire career, individual contributor, player coach, first, second, third line sales leadership, all in outbound, everything from very transactional, like full cycle, one call close, through to like deeply consultative SDR AE pairing. So I've seen a little bit of everything, and never did I ever think, when I left corporate to run the sales led go-to-market agency full time, would I be running 100% inbound funnel. Like it genuinely never occurred to me that is like a privilege that I would have. but the leads just keep coming in, and then I do work and I get referrals, and I'm active in quite a few communities. And so I'm often giving people help and advice for free as a community member. And then they're like, hey, well, actually, I know this other person you can help, or can you come in and do a proper engagement? So it has been a huge gift the past 4 years to run 100% inbound and referral based funnel. What I realized recently, so I have a product that I've been selling that's a done with you advisory product. And it's great. People rave about it. I have amazing testimonials, but it wasn't working for me because I found that I was constantly getting scope creep. So like I had this sense that I had built the product wrong for me. Like it was working for my clients, but I was like, ooh, I built something wrong. It happens, right? It was my first launch as a business owner. So I stopped selling it, took some time to reflect, and then I took 2 full weeks after that reflection to reimagine and rebuild the product. And what I got off the back of that is such an extraordinarily clear vision of exactly who this product helps the most. And so I know that I will continue to get inbound leads. Like I just came back from 3 weeks in Italy and I had 5 inbounds booked into my calendar, 1 from LinkedIn, 3 from AI search, 1 from a referral. So like the inbounds are still coming, praise be, but I know who I want to sell this product to. And I know I'm exceptional at outbound. Like I miss it a little bit if I'm being honest. So I just don't understand why I would wait for that person to find me when I know exactly who they are and what a big impact I can make for them. So I'm going to go out and find them.
And within that, did I read correctly? You went to kind of like Zoom Info, you did all your firmographic, you brought it down to 500 and something potential companies to reach out. But again, that's a lot. So you brought it from that down to a smaller number. I think it might have been around 20, 30 that you were going to focus on.
20, yeah.
So then what? So you've gone through the Zoom Info, you've got to around 500 targets, you've then filtered that down to around 20. 20, you don't need AI to send out messaging to 20 companies. So then what was your approach, or what were the kind of the signals that you were prepping, and how did you get them or acquire them before you then reached out? And then were you reaching out on LinkedIn? Were you trying to do one-to-one? Were you trying to, what was your approach once you got to that stage?
Yeah. So the 500 some companies, that was just after I applied my firmographic filters. And then it dipped down a little bit more than that when I applied my demographic filter, because I really need to make sure that they have a CRO or a VP of sales. And a lot of the organizations, like they don't have the hierarchical structure that I know I need to be a good partner to them, because they really need to have sales enablement. They need to have rev ops, because I'm going in and co-creating with them. So that brought it down a little bit more. But the signal I layered in is, are they going through M&A activity?
Okay.
Because where I'm starting, and this isn't the only person that the product is for. It's generally anytime somebody is going through a major disruption, like sprinting to try to get their next round, or like the M&A activity, of course, is a good one. But any major disruption works. But I wanted to start with that because I have 2 extraordinarily strong case studies that back up the M&A activity. And so I whittled the list down to only folks that are green companies, because now I have a point of view, means to smash teams together where they all have their sort of wild west approach and try to find a single source of truth from a language and a process perspective, and also what it means when you are now trying to get a team that sold 1 product to sell maybe a multi-product line or a more advanced product because you procured some additional capabilities. So getting the list that small now allows me to have a pretty clear point of view. But one of the questions you ask is, how does my cold outreach even different from what I'm teaching my clients? I don't have to scale. I'm a solopreneur. I don't want to scale. 20 is a huge list. I want to close 2 clients in Q3. You know what I mean? Like I'm just not, I'm not trying to reach everybody, close every deal. So I am actually going to do one-to-one. I still avoid any of that contact level personalization where I talk about their family vacations or their children. Just that's my personality, is that I like to keep it very focused on business. When we get on the phone, I'll be a barrel of monkeys. I'll have fun with you. But when it comes to
Sure.
written outreach, I just don't think that that's like the time to make it about me and my personality. I want it to fully be about ensuring that that person is coming away with my message with some credibility, some trust, some new insight. So I am going to take a one-to-one approach so that I can take the umbrella point of view that I believe to be true and find that fit for purpose for each organization.
I think this is great, Leslie. And maybe to bring our conversation full circle then, in that context, if you don't mind telling us, how do you earn the right to sell to them in that context? So it's obviously highly, highly personalized one-to-one. So, but what are you doing? What's your secret sauce there?
Yeah, so I'm just getting started. All I've done is send out LinkedIn Connect messages so far, because I'm fresh back off of the trip. But one of my favorite ways to earn the right is creating custom docs. And this doesn't have to be a big project, but creating custom assets. One of my favorite stories that I tell is when I sold to Fortune 500 chief procurement officers, and the signal that I used was that they were new in the CPO role. And so I would wait 2 weeks after I got the signal, and then I would send them a doc that was first 100 days in seat.
Very
Because
cool.
I knew that they were going to have to go on a road show with all of their internal business partners, because that is the customer of procurement. And so I was able to say, hey, like, we work with over 250 CPOs. Here's the things that have helped them the most in that first 100 days, getting their road show right. And I just started with a gift. So that's my general approach, is how can I make deposits before asks, so that I always am putting more in the bank than I'm ever trying to withdraw.
Yes, perfect.
Very good.
And you're using the right signal and giving a huge amount of value in tune with that signal. Yeah. Sorry, Niall. Yeah.
And with that kind of on your outbound with the M&A activity. So let's take a recent example. So Zendesk and the acquisition of the kind of AI native Forethought. That's two big companies coming together. One is lightning fast, AI native. The other one is a big beast of an organization, multi-product, multi-region. If you were to get the typical folks that you would get, the sales enablement, the rev ops, the CPOs, hero, et cetera, in a room, of both of those organizations within, let's say, the first 100 days, as they're trying to figure out how are we going to take these two companies, smash them together, the two GTM teams, where do we even start? Because there's no shortage of signals. They have tons of signals. They have every possible GTM solution. They have massive data sets. What would be your kind of recommendation within the first kind of 100 days as to how they should even approach it?
Yeah, I would probably wait a little bit to see who gets fired. Because in those situations, I mean, like, some people are going to get fired, and there's no reason for me to spend a bunch of time trying to build a business case with somebody that's about ready to lose their job. And I want to make sure that the conversations I was having were focused on the people that were ultimately going to be driving the strategy. So I'd wait a little bit to see where things landed. And then I would want to know the reason for the acquisition. Like, was it just to capture more market size, or was it because they wanted capabilities from that other company's tech stack, or somewhere in between? Because I do think that makes a difference. And then I would focus first on skill set gaps, both in the leadership team and also in, like, amongst the sales reps, because where I like to start all of my engagements is, of course, this process of diagnosing, but like, it's a 10-month engagement. I can't wait 10 months to give them ROI. So I love to start by seeing where we can uncover quick wins. And often when I go even into, like, large companies like a Zendesk, where it's a well-known brand name, I find that there's things that they aren't doing. Like, they don't have a process around flagging previous customers that moved into a new job. Or the way that they've organized their opportunity pipeline doesn't differentiate between people that, like, showed the second meeting, like, had a first meeting, but so never really were opportunities. So I like to dig into some of those kind of, like, hacks that I know work 99.9% of the time, and uncover quick wins while I took the time to do a proper diagnosis.
Yeah, good. That that's really interesting because, again, a lot of advanced companies that we may come across who have very sophisticated GTM outbound and inbound sequences and lots of different highly skilled team members who have got great CVs, but sometimes they forget the fundamentals. And when you kind of step it back and you remove all the layers and you go, okay, guys, you're after losing 100 customers last quarter. Where did they go? And you go, walk me through, where do they go? Where do you have that tagged? How did you find out? And they go, well, how are you doing all this sophisticated outbound and all this sophisticated inbound layered on top of kind of what I would call table stakes information that you either just don't know or it's fragmented? How do you kind of build on that? It's not a solid foundation. So as you said, it's amazing to see, and it's not it's not with negative intent. It's not because people aren't smart. It's because they tend to be very busy. They're being pulled in a different direction. There's different things that happen at different times. But 9 times out of 10, there is a back to basics element. There's something which has been missed that if you get that right, which is like the master data for e-commerce, if you don't have the right data, you can't present or showcase your products well within the Amazon website or platform. So we see, like you see, that a lot of the time it's going back to basics and saying, are we ticking all the kind of fundamentals before we layer on all the sophistication? Because all the sophistication means nothing if you're kind of sending the wrong message at scale at the wrong time to the wrong person.
Yeah, I feel like one of the threads of this entire conversation was a call to sort of slow down a bit, or at least take that step back to make sure that you are doing the right activities for the right reasons. And often that does take like a little bit of an external perspective. And maybe you're not going to hire somebody from outside of your company, but even bringing somebody from a different business unit in to be like, you take a look at this with fresh eyes. So I love that example.
So I don't know, Niall, I was there's one question from Daniel on LinkedIn that I think it's a nice actually summary kind of question to both of you, and maybe kind of helps us wrap it, because I know we've kept Leslie longer. This has been an amazing conversation. We've kept you longer than we'd intended. But so I think Daniel's question is which signals are worth acting on and which ones are just measurable noise dressed up as buying intent. I think we've covered it, but it might be just a nice way to wrap the conversation. So I go to you, Niall, first. So the question is, so how do we distinguish between the signals that are worth acting on and then the ones that are like, because we can go to all of the intent solutions and tools that are out there, and there's loads of noise, right? And how do we find the ones that are the right ones for us? So Niall, you first on that one.
Sure, it's a great question. And I suppose if we use kind of just one example, and Leslie brought this up earlier, if you got people coming to your website and they're looking at content, and you find out that through some technology that they're coming from Sony, but you don't necessarily know from which department, who they are, are they definitely interested? Did they get there by accident? Was it somebody else using their spouse's machine to log on, and that's how it looks like it's coming from Sony? So I think it's, if you're getting a signal which you think is demonstrating person intent, you have to have some kind of criteria to qualify that. And depending on the type of product that you're selling, is it an impulse buy and then it's kind of closer to the action or closer to the event that it's happening, or is it something that's putting hundreds of thousands into a purchase? It's not going to happen as a result of one click to download a piece of content, or that plus they came back again. There's going to be a whole series of interactions across different channels. So I think it's what's your framework for figuring out when to leverage a signal or signals, and then what do they inform and what do you do based on those? So I think back to Leslie's point is that you can have all the signals in the world, but if you don't have a process and a system and a framework to interpret those signals and then decide how they map back onto your processes and what to do about them, then that's a kind of a likelihood that it's a recipe to fall flat.
Okay. And Leslie, you answer that question.
Yeah.
How do you sift through them all?
Yeah. And Daniel, if you want that POV framework that I shared earlier, that was like problem unaware, option opportunity aware, vendor aware, I'd be happy to pop that over to you, because I think it might help you as you sort of go through the answering this question within your own organization. But I will tell you, one of my favorite is to use something that maps to the CEO statements And so even if it's a private company, like usually the CEO is making some sort of statements about the goals for the year or what they want. And I love using a CEO statement and then maybe using AI or using your knowledge to be like, okay, well, what does that CEO statement then mean for somebody in marketing or somebody in HR, whatever your ICP is? And then you can try to find a trigger, like they won an award for their innovation and it's in marketing, and the CEO said that they wanted to increase or like lower their CAC or something, right? So it's this call for you to go through and try to connect a few dots together that allow you to pick the signal that matters most to the person receiving the outreach.
Amazing. If I can summarize then, between Niall, right signal, right time, and Leslie connecting the dots through different stages of purchase intent, we almost have a perfect formula, I think. Niall, last word to you, maybe.
I think really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very much for being very generous with your time. And I think there's a lot of great points that have been pulled out that people can literally lift and start to apply. I think one of the themes that I take away is that there's a lot of noise about AI, there's a lot of noise about shiny objects, a lot of noise about new ways of doing things, but it's the fundamentals that keep on cropping up. So it doesn't matter whether it's old ways, new ways, there's always a consistent red thread, which is if you don't have the fundamentals right, it's going to be challenging to build those new frameworks, those new engines, and leverage AI if you haven't got the basics right.
Leslie, where can people find you if they want to access the POV framework or all of the great work that you, aside from LinkedIn, obviously? Where can they
Yes, well, they can snag a copy of my book, Profit Generating Pipeline. They can do that at salesledgtm.com/book. You can find me pretty much on all social media. I am a chronically online person, and that's where you hear me talk about stuff like signals and intent, Decoded.
Leslie,
very
thank
good.
you so much for your time, and Niall, thank you. Sorry.
Perfect. Just everybody remember that Leslie likes dogs, so just flood her inbox.
Send me pictures of dogs. Literally, yes. I welcome them.
You can sell her anything if you send her pictures of dogs.
Excellent. All right.
Thank
you very much, Leslie.
Have a great
weekend.
Have a great
Bye-bye.
day.
Bye. Thank you.